Story number 1. The Call from Beyond. Winter in Chicago is a relentless adversary. The biting cold seeps into every nook and cranny, turning the city into a frozen maze of shadows and snow. As a night shift operator at Meridian Communications, I was no stranger to the eerie silence that enveloped the office during the dead of night. My job was monotonous monitoring calls, redirecting inquiries, and occasionally dealing with late-night emergencies. But nothing could have prepared me for the call that would change everything. It was January 2015, and I had just settled into my chair for another long night. The fluorescent lights buzzed softly overhead, casting a sterile glow on the rows of desks that stretched out before me. My colleagues had long since left, leaving me alone with the humming machines and the occasional distant siren echoing through the empty streets. At around 2 a.m., my phone rang, jolting me from my thoughts. The caller ID displayed an unfamiliar number, an oddity in a system where most calls came from repeat business lines or known contacts. I glanced at the screen, expecting it to be another late-night inquiry. But something about the number felt off. I answered the call, the receiver cold to the touch. Meridian Communications. This is Alex speaking. How may I assist you? There was a brief pause. Then a shaky voice came through. Please, help me. I'm stuck. I need help. I felt a chill run down my spine. Not from the cold, but from the desperation in the caller's voice. Can you tell me where you are? I'm trapped in an accident. My car crashed. I can't move. Please, send someone. I tried to keep my voice steady, masking the unease that was creeping into my own thoughts. Sir, can you provide me with your location so I can dispatch emergency services? The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the distant howling of the wind outside. Then, a faint scraping sound echoed through the line. I don't know. Everything's blurry. Please, hurry. I leaned closer to the phone, trying to make out any discernible details. Sir, I need more information to help you. Are you injured? Is anyone else with you? The line crackled, and the caller's voice wavered. No, I'm alone. Please, help me. Before I could respond, the call disconnected, leaving me staring at the blank screen. My heart raced as I quickly processed what had just happened. A man calling for help, claiming to be trapped in an accident. Something didn't add up. I tried calling back the number, but it was unreachable. The line dead. Minutes turned into hours, and the night wore on without incident. Yet, the image of that desperate caller lingered in my mind, gnawing at my sense of reality. I tried to push it aside, convincing myself it was just another late-night prank or a confused caller. But then, 2 days later, the call became real in a way I couldn't have imagined. The local police department reported a severe accident at the location the caller had vaguely described, a deserted intersection on the outskirts of town. Car had crashed violently, but the driver had died at the scene, leaving no survivors. There was no sign of anyone else involved. No witnesses. Nothing to suggest that someone had survived against all odds. I couldn't shake the feeling that the call had been more than just a random act. That night, as I prepared for my shift, I decided to investigate further. I accessed the call logs, tracing the mysterious number back to a blocked area of the city, a place I had never been before and had no way of knowing. Driven by a mix of fear and curiosity, I dug deeper into the incident. The police report was sparse, only confirming the basics of the accident. No one had seen the driver survive. No reports of a missing person matching the description. It was as if the call had been a plea from beyond the grave, a voice lost in the chaos of death. That night, back at the office, the atmosphere felt heavier. The usual hum of the machines seemed to resonate with an unspoken tension. As the clock struck midnight, the phone rang again, same number, same plea for help. Meridian Communications. This is Alex. I'm still here. They won't let me go. Help me. The desperation was palpable, and this time, I couldn't dismiss it as a prank. Sir, please stay on the line. I'm sending emergency services to your location. But before I could act, the call ended abruptly, leaving me staring at the lifeless screen once more. Determined to find answers, I decided to visit the accident site the following day, hoping to make sense of the inexplicable. The area was deserted, the remnants of the crash still visible beneath the fresh snow. The wreckage was severe, twisted metal and shattered glass scattered across the intersection. But there was no sign of a survivor, no body, no indication that anyone had lived through the crash. It was as if the car had been a one-way ticket to death. As I stood there, processing the eerie similarity to the call, a cold wind swept through the area, carrying with it a faint, almost melodic whisper. "Thank you." I turned around, my heart pounding, but there was nothing there, just the empty streets and the silent, snow-covered landscape. The words echoed in my mind, a haunting reminder that some calls never end, and some voices never find peace. Back at the office, the nights became increasingly restless. The phone rang more frequently, always at odd hours, always with the same plea for help. Each time, the caller's story remained consistent. A man trapped in an accident, unable to move, desperate for assistance. Sleep eluded me as I delved deeper into the mystery, connecting the dots between the calls and the fatal accident. I began to suspect that the caller was a spirit, a soul trapped in limbo, unable to move on from the moment of death. The idea both terrified and fascinated me, pushing me to find a way to help. I reached out to local paranormal investigators, hoping they could shed some light on the situation. Together, we returned to the accident site, setting up equipment to detect any unusual activity. As midnight approached, the air grew thick with anticipation, the cold biting into our skin. The phone rang just as the clock struck 12, the same mysterious number appearing on the screen. I answered swiftly, the investigators watching intently. "Please, help me." The voice was faint, filled with sorrow and desperation. "I can't move. They're keeping me here." Determined to reach out, I spoke softly. "I'm here to help you. Please, tell me what happened." Silence followed, the tension in the room palpable. Then, the whisper returned, clearer this time. "The accident. It wasn't just a crash. They never found me. I need closure." The temperature dropped suddenly, our breaths visible in the cold air. The equipment began to malfunction, lights flickering and screens distorting. A spectral presence filled the room, the air heavy with an unseen force. "We can't leave until the truth is known," the voice insisted, now louder and more commanding. "Remember me. Tell my story." As the night wore on, the apparition's presence grew stronger, the spirit of the lost man reaching out for recognition and remembrance. It was a plea for the living to acknowledge his existence, to ensure that his story would not fade into obscurity. By dawn, the spectral force had dissipated, leaving behind a profound sense of peace. The calls ceased, and the air felt lighter, as if a burden had been lifted from the very fabric of the city. The accident site remained unchanged, but now, it held a deeper significance, a reminder that every life, no matter how brief, leaves an indelible mark on the world. I continued my work at Meridian Communications, forever changed by the experience. The calls had stopped, but the lessons remained etched in my mind. In the stillness of the night, beneath the cold embrace of winter, the echoes of the past can reach out to the present, seeking acknowledgement and closure. If you ever find yourself alone on a cold, quiet night, and you receive a call from an unknown number, remember my story. Sometimes, the voices that reach out are not bound by life or death, but by the desperate need to be remembered. Honor their pleas, listen to their stories, and you may just help a restless spirit find the peace it so desperately seeks. Because in the silent hours, beneath the veil of night, the calls of the lost linger, waiting for someone to answer, someone to remember. Story number 2. The strange light in the warehouse. Winter in Seattle is a time of relentless rain and biting cold. But nothing compares to the isolation I felt during my night shifts at the old Thompson warehouse. Nestled on the outskirts of the city, the warehouse stood as a relic of a bygone era. Its vast, dimly lit interiors filled with forgotten crates and abandoned machinery. I never imagined that this place, cloaked in shadows and silence, would become the setting for the most terrifying nights of my life. I had taken the job out of necessity, with bills piling up and opportunities scarce. Working the late hours seemed like the only option. The warehouse manager, Mr. Thompson, was a stern man with little patience for questions or complaints. He treated the place like his personal kingdom, insisting that everything was in order and that there was nothing to fear. But as the weeks turned into months, I began to sense that the warehouse held secrets far darker than I could have ever imagined. It was my second month on the job when I first noticed the strange light. It started innocently enough, a faint glow emanating from the far corner of the main storage area. At first, I dismissed it as a malfunctioning light fixture or a trick of my tired eyes. But every night, the light reappeared, flickering intermittently like a ghostly beacon calling out to me. One particularly cold December night, the light was brighter than usual, casting long, eerie shadows across the warehouse floor. Curiosity gnawed at me as I approached the source, my footsteps echoing ominously in the vast, empty space. As I neared the corner, the light seemed to dance and swirl, forming shapes that I couldn't quite comprehend. My heart pounded in my chest, a mix of fear and intrigue urging me to uncover the truth. Just as I reached out to touch the light, it vanished, leaving behind a chilling silence. I spun around, scanning the room for any sign of movement, but there was nothing, only the cold, stale air and the distant drip of water from a leaky pipe. Shaking off the unsettling feeling, I returned to my duties, trying to convince myself that it was nothing more than my imagination running wild. Days turned into weeks, and the light continued its nightly appearances. Each time, it became more intense, more persistent, as if trying to communicate something urgent. My sleep was plagued by nightmares of the warehouse engulfed in flames and shadowy figures lurking in the darkness. I began to dread the nights, my anxiety growing with each passing shift. Then came the night when I felt a presence. It was late, around 2 a.m., and the warehouse was cloaked in darkness, the only illumination coming from the flickering light in the corner. I was making my rounds, checking inventory and ensuring that everything was in its place, when I felt a light tap on my shoulder. Startled, I whipped around, my flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. But there was no one there, only empty space and the lingering echo of my own heavy breaths. Heart racing, I took a step back, my mind grappling with the inexplicable. Had I imagined it? Was it the exhaustion finally catching up with me? I tried to shake off the fear, convincing myself that there was a logical explanation. But deep down, I knew something was terribly wrong. Determined to get to the bottom of the mystery, I decided to investigate the history of the Thompson warehouse. My research led me to old newspaper archives and faded records, uncovering a tragic story that had been buried beneath layers of time and dust. Decades ago, the warehouse had been the site of a horrific accident. A fire had broken out one winter night, engulfing the entire building in flames. Many workers had perished in the blaze, their bodies never recovered, leaving behind only the charred remnants of what once was a thriving industrial hub. Among the victims was a young woman named Clara Mitchell, a diligent worker with dreams of a better future. Clara had been working the night shift, much like me, when the fire had consumed the warehouse. Her screams had been heard by those who tried to escape, but the inferno had been too swift, too merciless. Over the years, rumors had circulated about restless spirits haunting the premises, but Mr. Thompson had always dismissed them as mere superstitions. Armed with this newfound knowledge, I returned to the warehouse with a heavy heart and a sense of purpose. I wanted to honor Clara's memory, to bring some semblance of peace to the tormented souls that still lingered within the cold, dark walls. I set up a small altar in the corner where the light often appeared, placing a photograph of Clara, an old, black and white image I had found in the archives, alongside candles and flowers. As I lit the candles, the warehouse seemed to hold its breath, the oppressive silence pressing in on me from all sides. I spoke softly into the darkness, recounting Clara's story and expressing my hope that her spirit, and those of her fellow victims, could finally find peace. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the light began to flicker, brighter and more vibrant than ever before. The air grew warmer, the chill that had always permeated the warehouse lifting slightly. The shadows seemed to soften, the oppressive darkness retreating as if respecting my gesture of remembrance. Suddenly, the sound of soft, haunting laughter filled the air, a melody of sorrow and longing that sent shivers down my spine. The light in the corner swirled and danced, taking on the shape of a figure draped in white, her eyes filled with an indescribable sadness. Clara stood before me, her presence both ethereal and painfully real. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice echoing through the vast space. "You have remembered us." Tears welled up in my eyes as I nodded, overwhelmed by the encounter. The figure of Clara began to fade, her smile a bittersweet reminder of a life cut short too soon. As she disappeared, the light in the corner dimmed, the shadows receding back into the darkness. In the weeks that followed, the strange occurrences at the Thompson warehouse ceased entirely. The light no longer flickered, the oppressive presence lifted, and the haunting laughter became nothing more than a distant memory. The warehouse, once a place of fear and tragedy, transformed into a site of remembrance and healing. Mr. Thompson, witnessing the change, finally acknowledged the stories of the restless spirits, deciding to honor the memories of those who had lost their lives in the tragic fire. He organized memorials and dedicated the warehouse to Clara and her fellow workers, ensuring that their stories would never be forgotten. Looking back, I realized that my time at the Thompson warehouse was more than just a night shift job. It was a journey into the heart of sorrow and redemption. Clara's spirit taught me the importance of remembrance, of giving voice to the voiceless, and of finding peace in the midst of darkness. If you ever find yourself alone in a place where shadows linger and the past refuses to stay buried, remember my story. Sometimes, the spirits that haunt our spaces are not there to instill fear but to seek acknowledgement and closure. Honor their memories, listen to their silent pleas, and you may just help a restless soul find the peace it so desperately needs. Because in the silent hours of the night, beneath the veil of snow and shadows, the echoes of the past can reach out to touch the present, reminding us all that some stories never truly end. They simply wait to be heard. Story number 3. The empty elevator. Winter in New York City is unforgiving. The biting cold seeps into every corner of the towering skyscrapers, where the hustle and bustle of the day give way to the eerie silence of the night. As a night security guard at the Harrington Towers, a venerable office building that has stood proudly amidst the modern glass giants, I've grown accustomed to the solitude that comes with the job. Most nights are uneventful, marked by the rhythmic hum of the heating system and the occasional creak of the old building settling under the weight of snow. Harrington Towers has its own set of peculiarities, not the least of which is the infamous 13th floor. Superstitious tenants often avoid it, believing it to be cursed, a relic from an era when the building was constructed with less regard for modern sensibilities. The 13th floor, now converted into storage and rarely accessed, has always been a source of whispered rumors among the staff. Tales of strange occurrences and unexplained phenomena circulate, but I've always dismissed them as mere urban legends, until that night. It was December 14th, 2010. A night when the snow fell thick and relentless, blanketing the city in a pristine layer of white. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows and making the corridors echo with every gust. My shift was just beginning, and I was stationed in the security office on the ground floor, monitoring the surveillance cameras that covered every inch of the building. The elevators at Harrington Towers are old-fashioned, their brass buttons gleaming dimly under the flickering lights. Most of the time, they operate smoothly, transporting tired office workers up and down the floors with mechanical efficiency. But lately, there had been an unsettling trend. The elevators seemed to move on their own, stopping unexpectedly at the 13th floor. At first, I thought it was just a glitch in the system, perhaps a loose wire or a malfunctioning sensor. But the stops became more frequent, more deliberate, and always at precisely 2 a.m. Tonight was no different. At exactly 2 a.m., the elevator dinged softly, the doors sliding open to reveal an empty lobby. My heart skipped a beat as I watched it descend to the ground floor, stopping briefly before continuing its journey to the top floors. The 13th floor light flickered ominously as the elevator paused there. Even though no one had called for it, curiosity gnawed at me. What was causing this anomaly? The building's maintenance team had no reports of electrical issues, and the elevator had never behaved this way before. Determined to get to the bottom of it, I decided to investigate after my usual rounds. Around 3 a.m., the laughter of a child echoed through the deserted hallways, sending chills down my spine. It wasn't just any child's laughter. It was hollow, almost mechanical, devoid of genuine emotion. I followed the sound, my flashlight cutting through the darkness, leading me towards the source. The noise led me to the elevator shaft, where the doors of the 13th floor remained stubbornly closed. As I approached, the temperature seemed to drop, the air growing thick with an unspoken dread. I glanced up at the security cameras, noting that no one had entered or exited the elevator on the 13th floor, my breath visible in the frigid air. I reached out to press the call button, but my hand froze mid-air, the unease anchoring me to the spot. Suddenly, the elevator doors creaked open, revealing the empty hallway of the 13th floor. The door slid shut behind me with a finality that resonated through the silent building. I stepped inside, the room cold and untouched, the only sound my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. The floorboards groaned under my weight as I walked down the corridor, my flashlight casting long, wavering shadows against the walls. In the center of the hallway stood a single, antique chair, its presence both inviting and foreboding. The child's laughter echoed again, now closer, reverberating through the empty space. I approached the chair cautiously, my mind racing with questions. Who was this child? Why was their laughter so hollow? As I reached out to touch the chair, the room seemed to distort, the walls bending and stretching in impossible ways. The air grew colder, and the shadows deepened, swirling around me like dark tendrils. The chair began to move on its own, rocking gently as if someone invisible was seated there. My flashlight flickered, and for a split second, I thought I saw the faint outline of a child's figure seated in the chair, their eyes hollow and empty. I recoiled in fear, stumbling back towards the elevator, but the doors slammed shut before I could reach them, trapping me in the 13th floor corridor. The laughter intensified, morphing into a cacophony of ghostly voices, their words indistinct but filled with anguish and despair. I felt a presence pressing down on me, a weight of sorrow that seemed to crush my very soul. Desperate to escape, I pounded on the elevator doors, my cries echoing through the hollow hallway. But the doors remained unresponsive, the laughter continuing to grow louder, more insistent. It was then that I noticed the wallpaper peeling away in the corners, revealing strange symbols and markings that pulsed with an eerie light. The symbols seemed to move, shifting and rearranging themselves in a language I couldn't understand. Summoning every ounce of courage, I pressed the call button again, pleading for help. The doors finally creaked open, the elevator descending swiftly to the ground floor. I didn't hesitate, rushing inside as the doors shut behind me, the laughter fading into an unsettling silence. Panting and shaken, I made my way back to the security office, the experience leaving me questioning my own sanity. The next morning, I reviewed the security footage, replaying the events in slow motion, The cameras had captured the elevator's autonomous movement, the fleeting image of the child's apparition, and the distorted symbols on the 13th floor corridor. It was undeniable evidence of something supernatural haunting Harrington Towers. Determined to uncover the truth, I delved into the building's history, uncovering a tragic story that had been buried in time. Decades ago, Harrington Towers had been home to a young boy named Tommy Anderson, whose life was cut short by a mysterious illness. Tommy had been a bright, cheerful child, beloved by all who knew him. His laughter was infectious, his presence a beacon of joy in the building. But one winter night, during a fierce snowstorm, Tommy disappeared without a trace. His family searched desperately, but he was never found. The circumstances of his disappearance remained a mystery, and over time, his memory faded, the story becoming a hushed whisper among the older tenants. The symbols I had seen on the 13th floor were part of an old, forgotten ritual intended to protect the building from dark forces. It seemed that Tommy's spirit had been inadvertently trapped, his laughter a desperate cry for help, his presence a lingering echo of a life abruptly ended. Armed with this knowledge, I returned to the 13th floor, determined to put Tommy's spirit to rest. I gathered candles, an old photo of Tommy, and the protective symbols I had deciphered from the wallpaper, setting up a small altar in the center of the hallway. I lit the candles and placed the photo before me, speaking softly into the stillness. "Tommy," I called out, my voice steady despite the fear gripping me. "I know your story. I'm here to help you find peace." The air grew warmer, the oppressive chill lifting as the symbols glowed with a comforting light. The laughter ceased, replaced by a gentle sigh that seemed to emanate from the very walls. The presence of Tommy's spirit enveloped me, a serene calm washing over the hallway. "Thank you," the voice echoed, no longer filled with despair but with gratitude. The symbols on the walls shimmered, their light growing brighter until they fused into a single, radiant beam that enveloped the room. Tommy's apparition appeared once more, his eyes filled with peace and his smile genuine. As the light intensified, Tommy began to fade, his spirit finally free from the confines of the 13th floor. The hallway returned to its original state, the symbols dissolving into the air, leaving behind a sense of tranquility that had long been absent. The elevator ceased its mysterious movements, the 13th floor no longer a source of fear but a place of remembrance and respect. Harrington Towers returned to its routine, the whispers of Tommy's story becoming a cherished part of its history, a testament to the enduring power of compassion and the importance of remembering those who have been forgotten. In the years that followed, I continued my shifts at the inn, the memory of that night lingering like a shadow in my mind. The experience taught me that sometimes, the echoes of the past reach out to us in the most unexpected ways, seeking acknowledgement and closure. If you ever find yourself alone in a place where the past refuses to stay buried, remember my story. Honor the memories that linger. Listen to the whispers of those who have gone before, and you may just help a restless spirit find the peace it so desperately seeks. Because in the silent corridors of time, beneath the layers of snow and shadows, the footsteps of the past can reach out to touch the present, reminding us all that some stories never truly end. They simply wait to be heard. Story number 4. The Vanishing Customer. Winter in Texas can be deceptive. The nights are colder than you'd expect, and the streets often lie quiet under a blanket of snow that turns the mundane into something almost otherworldly. I've worked the late shift at Joe's Corner Store for over 3 years, and while the job itself is monotonous, it offers a strange sense of peace. The store is small, cluttered with snacks and cold beverages, and situated on the edge of a sleepy town where not much happens after midnight. It was a typical Saturday night in December 2016. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows and making the neon sign above the store flicker sporadically. I was restocking the shelves with chips and soda when the clock struck 2 a.m. That's when he walked in, a man in his late 40s, dressed in a worn leather jacket and jeans. his face partially hidden by a woolen scarf. He moved with a slow, deliberate pace, browsing the aisles before heading straight to the counter. I greeted him with a tired smile. "Evening. What can I get for you tonight?" He nodded, pulling out his wallet and placing a few items on the counter: a bag of chips, a couple of soda cans, and a chocolate bar. I rang up his purchases, exchanging a few words about the weather and the ongoing snowstorm. "Looks like it's never going to let up," I remarked, sliding the receipt across the counter. He glanced at the receipt, then up at me, his eyes meeting mine for a brief moment before he nodded again. "Thanks." Without another word, he turned and walked out the door, the bell above the register jingling softly as he exited into the stormy night. I watched him disappear into the darkness, the sound of his footsteps muffled by the heavy snowfall, shaking off the eerie feeling that sometimes accompanies late-night shifts. I returned to my duties. It wasn't until a few minutes later that I decided to check the security cameras, a routine I rarely adhered to unless something unusual happened. I sat down at the small office nook near the back, flipping through the footage from the past few hours. There he was, the man, clearly identifiable, making his purchases and leaving the store. Everything seemed normal until I rewound to just before he stepped inside. To my horror, the footage showed the man standing at the entrance, his hand extended as if hesitating. But he never actually walked through the door. Instead, he seemed to fade into the snowstorm, his form becoming increasingly transparent until he vanished entirely. My heart pounded in my chest as I rewound and played the moment again, certain that it was just a glitch in the camera. But no matter how many times I watched, the man never fully entered the store. Yet, the receipt I handed him was genuine, the transaction completed as if he had been there. Confused and unnerved, I glanced around the store. The night was silent, the only sound the occasional drip of water from the roof and the distant howl of the wind. I walked back to the counter, staring at the empty doorway, trying to rationalize what I had just seen. As the night wore on, strange things began to happen. Items on the shelves moved ever so slightly, only noticeable when I wasn't looking directly at them. The lights flickered intermittently, casting long shadows that danced across the walls. And then there was the sound, the faint echo of footsteps that seemed to follow me through the store. Despite there being no one else around, I started to question my sanity, wondering if the isolation and the stress of the job were playing tricks on me. But the evidence was undeniable. Someone, or something, was there with me, interacting with the store in ways that defied explanation. Determined to get to the bottom of it, I delved into the history of Joe's Corner Store. The store had been a family-run business for generations, and I discovered that many years ago, a man much like the one I'd seen had frequented the store. His name was Thomas Miller, a loyal customer who was known for his quiet demeanor and his love for snacks and soda. Tragically, one winter night, Thomas had been involved in a severe car accident on the very road leading to the store. He never made it home, and his passing was a somber event in the town's history. According to old newspaper clippings, Thomas had always been a kind man, loved by everyone who knew him. Realizing that the man I'd encountered was likely Thomas Miller, I felt a mixture of fear and compassion. Perhaps his spirit was still wandering, seeking something he couldn't find in life. The thought of helping him find peace gave me a sense of purpose amidst the growing unease. I decided to perform a small ritual of remembrance. I placed a framed photograph of Thomas on the counter, along with a candle and a bouquet of fresh flowers, gifts he had often purchased during his visits. "Here, Thomas," I whispered, lighting the candle. "You're remembered." As soon as the candle flickered to life, the atmosphere in the store shifted. The oppressive chill seemed to lift, and the shadows softened. The receipt on the counter began to glow faintly, the light dancing across the walls in a gentle, soothing pattern. The footsteps ceased, and the store felt peaceful for the first time that night. I sat back, watching the candle burn, feeling a sense of calm wash over me. It was as if Thomas was acknowledging my gesture, a silent thank you that filled the room with warmth. The next morning, I checked the security cameras again, expecting to see something different. To my relief, there was no sign of Thomas or any other unexplained phenomena. The store was just as I had left it, the morning sun casting a golden glow through the windows. Word spread quickly about the strange occurrences that night, and many townsfolk offered their own stories of Thomas's kindness and his untimely passing. The ritual had not only helped me but also brought a sense of closure to the community that had long remembered Thomas fondly. In the months that followed, the strange events at Joe's corner store ceased entirely. The lights remained steady, the items stayed in place, and the footsteps were nothing but a memory. The store continued to thrive, a beacon of warmth and community spirit, unmarred by the shadows of the past. Yet, every now and then, late at night, I'd catch a glimpse of a shadow moving in the corner of my eye or hear the faintest echo of a chuckle that didn't belong to anyone else. But now, instead of fear, I felt a sense of peace, knowing that Thomas had found his rest and that his spirit watched over the store with a gentle, protective presence. If you ever find yourself alone in a place where memories linger and the past refuses to stay buried, remember my story. Sometimes, the spirits that remain are not there to haunt but to seek acknowledgement and peace. Honor their memories, listen to their silent pleas, and you may just help a restless soul find the closure it has long been denied. Because in the quiet moments of the night, beneath the veil of snow and silence, the echoes of the past can reach out to touch the present, reminding us all that some stories never truly end. They simply wait to be heard. Story number 5. Laughter in the hallway. Winter in Florida is an oddity. Sun-soaked days giving way to balmy nights. But in the sterile corridors of St. Mary's Hospital, winter's chill seemed to seep in from another realm entirely. As a night nurse, my shifts were long and often lonely, the hum of fluorescent lights and the distant beeping of monitors my only companions. The hospital was a sprawling maze of rooms and hallways, each one echoing with its own stories of pain, hope, and sometimes inexplicable mysteries. I had been working the night shift for over a year, becoming accustomed to the quiet solitude that only a hospital in the dead of night could offer. Most nights were uneventful, punctuated by the occasional emergency or the comforting presence of a patient recovering from surgery. But there was one room that always sent a shiver down my spine, a room at the end of a seldom-used wing. Room 312. It was an old ward, renovated decades ago, but still retaining an air of abandonment that made it feel almost out of place in the modern hospital. The first time I heard the laughter, it was just a faint giggle, barely audible over the ambient noise of the hospital. I was checking vitals in room 207 when it happened. A soft, eerie laughter echoed down the hallway, sending a chill through my veins. I paused, listening intently, trying to locate the source. The laughter grew slightly louder, more insistent, but still without any discernible direction. Curiosity piqued. I made my way towards room 312 during a lull in my duties. The hallway was dimly lit, the fluorescent lights flickering intermittently, casting long shadows that danced eerily on the walls. As I approached the room, the laughter grew louder, unmistakably coming from within. My heart raced as I reached for the door handle, hesitant to open the door to the unknown. Pushing the door open, I was met with a scene that made my blood run cold. The room was empty, no patients, no staff, just the pristine bed and the standard medical equipment. Yet, the bed was disheveled, as if someone had been lying there moments before. The laughter ceased abruptly, leaving an oppressive silence that pressed down on me. I stepped inside, flashlight in hand, scanning the room for any sign of movement or presence. Nothing, just the unnerving emptiness and the lingering echo of the laughter that still seemed to resonate in the back of my mind. I shook off the feeling, attributing it to my imagination fueled by the isolation and the long hours. As I turned to leave, I noticed something peculiar, a single, delicate handprint on the window, smeared with what looked like faint traces of moisture. as if someone had pressed their hand against the glass in a hurry. Over the next few weeks, the laughter became a regular occurrence. Each night around 3 a.m., without fail, the giggles would start, growing into full-blown laughter that seemed to emanate from room 312. The bed would be disturbed, pillows tossed aside, and the handprint on the window would remain, now more pronounced and almost smeared by repeated contact. Determined to uncover the truth, I delved into the hospital's records, searching for any history associated with room 312. What I found was a tragic story of a young woman named Clara Bennett, who had been admitted to the ward in 1995. Clara was battling a rare and aggressive form of cancer, her spirit as resilient as her body. Despite the best efforts of the medical team, Clara passed away alone in that very room, her family unable to visit due to unforeseen circumstances. The more I read about Clara, the more the unexplained phenomena made sense. It was as if her spirit was trapped, reliving her final moments in a loop of isolation and despair. The laughter was a haunting contrast to her tragic story, a desperate attempt to reach out, to be remembered, to break free from the confines of room 312. One particularly stormy night, as the wind howled outside and the hospital was plunged into darkness by a power outage, the phenomena intensified. The laughter was louder than ever, reverberating through the entire wing. I felt an overwhelming compulsion to enter room 312, to confront whatever lingered within, grabbing a spare flashlight and a radio in case I needed to call for help. I made my way to the room. The door was locked, but the latch had been tampered with, barely a hint that someone had tried to open it. I pushed it open gently, the hinges groaning in protest. Inside, the room was colder than usual, the air heavy with a sense of sorrow. The bed was once again in disarray, but this time, there was something else, a framed photograph lying on the floor. This glass shattered, revealing a picture of Clara smiling, her eyes filled with hope and determination. As I picked up the photograph, the laughter began anew, this time more urgent and pleading. I felt a presence behind me, a gentle yet sorrowful energy that wrapped around me like a cold embrace. Turning slowly, I faced the window, the handprint now glowing faintly in the dim light. "Clara?" I whispered, my voice trembling. "I'm sorry you had to go through that alone." The room seemed to breathe with her presence, the temperature rising slightly as if in response to my words. The laughter softened, transforming into a quiet, grateful sigh. I placed the photograph back on the bed, feeling a sense of peace wash over me. "Find peace," the voice echoed, a final whisper that resonated through the room. "Remember me." With that, the handprint faded, the room settling into a serene stillness. I knew then that Clara had finally been acknowledged, her spirit freed from the endless cycle of isolation. Leaving room 312, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders, the eerie occurrences ceasing as if they had never existed. In the days that followed, I continued my duties with a newfound sense of purpose and compassion. St. Mary's Hospital remained a place of healing and hope, but now, it also held the memory of Clara Bennett, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, there is a yearning for connection and a desire to be remembered. If you ever find yourself alone in the dead of night, whether in a hospital, a secluded home, or any place of solitude, remember Clara's story. Sometimes, the echoes of the past reach out to us, seeking acknowledgement and peace. Honor their memories, listen to their silent pleas, and you may just help a restless spirit find the closure it so desperately needs. Because in the quiet corners of our lives, beneath the layers of silence and solitude, the whispers of the past linger, waiting for someone to listen, someone to remember. Story number 6. Footsteps on the rooftop. Winter in Chicago is unforgiving. The bitter cold seeps into every crevice, and the wind whistles through the towering skyscrapers, carrying with it the whispers of the city that never truly sleeps. As a night security guard at the Grandview Mall, I had grown accustomed to the solitude that came with the job. The mall was a sprawling labyrinth of stores and corridors. But by night, it transformed into a ghostly expanse, silent except for the occasional hum of the heating system and the distant sounds of traffic below. My shift began at midnight, a time when the mall's lights were dimmed to a soft glow, and the shadows stretched long across the polished floors. I parked myself in the security office, a small, cluttered room filled with monitors and surveillance equipment. From here, I could oversee every inch of the mall, from the grand atrium to the secluded corners of the rooftop garden. The first few nights were uneventful, the silence of the empty mall a comforting presence. I would occasionally wander through the corridors, checking locks and ensuring that everything was in order. It was during one of these routine checks that I first heard it, the soft, rhythmic sound of footsteps echoing from above. At around 3 a.m., when the cold was at its peak and the wind howled fiercest, the footsteps began. First, they were faint, almost indistinguishable from the natural sounds of the building settling. But gradually, they grew louder, more deliberate, as if someone or something was pacing back and forth on the rooftop. I glanced up at the security monitors, trying to locate the source of the noise. The rooftop was a vast area, adorned with potted plants and winding pathways, a stark contrast to the bustling activity below. According to the cameras, the rooftop was empty. No one was there. Shrugging it off as a trick of the mind, I returned to my post, the footsteps fading into the background of my thoughts. But the sound persisted night after night, always around the same time, always coming from the rooftop. Each night, I would watch the monitors, hoping to catch a glimpse of the elusive figure. But the screens remained blank. Frustration began to gnaw at me. Was I losing my mind? The nights were long, and the isolation could play tricks on anyone. But deep down, I knew there was something more to the footsteps, something that defied explanation. One particularly frigid night, determination overrode doubt. I decided to investigate firsthand. Bundling up in layers of warm clothing, I made my way to the rooftop access point. The door leading to the rooftop was always locked. But for some reason, on that night, it was ajar. My pulse quickened as I approached, the cold biting through my gloves. I pushed the door open fully, the hinges creaking in protest. The rooftop was enveloped in darkness, the only light coming from the moon filtering through the cloudy sky. The sound of footsteps was unmistakable now, louder and more urgent than ever. I took a deep breath, my heart pounding in my chest, and stepped out into the open air. The snow crunched under my boots as I followed the sound. Flashlight in hand, the footprints led me along the narrow pathways of the rooftop garden, past the rows of potted plants that glistened under the moonlight. The footsteps stopped abruptly, and I found myself standing before a secluded gazebo, its ornate design obscured by shadows. I approached cautiously, the beam of my flashlight cutting through the darkness. As I neared the gazebo, the temperature seemed to drop even further, my breath visible in the icy air. The footsteps had ceased, replaced by an oppressive silence that pressed in on me from all sides. Taking a step closer, I peered inside the gazebo. There was nothing there, no one in sight. The air was thick with a sense of unease, a feeling that I wasn't alone despite the empty space before me. I reached out, intending to close the door and end the night, but my hand froze mid-motion. Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind me, the sound deafening in the silent rooftop garden. Panic surged through me as I spun around, my flashlight flickering in my hand. The room was dark, the only light coming from the moon outside. And then, I saw it. A pair of glowing red eyes staring back at me from the shadows. Frozen in fear, I could only watch as a spectral figure materialized before me. It was a woman, her form ethereal and translucent, dressed in a flowing white gown that seemed to shimmer in the moonlight. Her eyes, the same unnerving red, bore into mine with a sorrowful intensity. "Why are you here?" she whispered, her voice echoing through the cold night air. I managed to stammer, I don't know. Who are you?" She took a step forward, her presence both haunting and tragic. "I can't find peace," she lamented. "I've been searching for so long." I felt a surge of compassion amidst my fear. "How can I help you?" Her gaze softened, the sorrow in her eyes deepening. "Remember me. Acknowledge my existence." Before I could respond, she began to fade, her form dissolving into the night sky as the first light of dawn began to break. The oppressive silence lifted, replaced by the gentle hum of the heating system and the distant sounds of the waking city below. Shaken, I made my way back to the security office. The image of her red eyes burned into my memory. The door to the gazebo was still ajar, but the footprints had vanished, leaving no trace of their existence. It was as if the encounter had been nothing more than a ghostly illusion, a figment of my overworked mind. Determined to find answers, I delved into the history of the Grandview Mall, speaking with longtime employees and scouring old records. What I discovered was a story of tragedy and loss that mirrored my own experience. Decades ago, the mall had been home to a beautiful woman named Elena Ivanova, a prominent artist known for her captivating murals that adorned the walls of the shopping center. Elena had fallen in love with a local architect, a man who shared her passion for art and design. Their love was the stuff of legends, a beacon of hope and creativity in the bustling city. But their happiness was short-lived. One winter night, a fire had broken out in the rooftop garden, consuming Elena's artwork and trapping her inside the gazebo. Despite the efforts of firefighters, she perished in the flames, her spirit forever bound to the place where she had lost everything she held dear. The spectral figure I had encountered was Elena, her restless spirit yearning for acknowledgement and closure. The footsteps on the rooftop were her way of reaching out, a desperate plea for someone to remember her and honor her legacy. Armed with this knowledge, I decided to perform a ritual of remembrance, hoping to bring peace to Elena's troubled soul. I gathered photographs of her work, personal mementos from her life, and lit candles around the gazebo, creating a space of light and warmth amidst the cold darkness of winter. "Elena," I called out softly, "I know your story. I'm sorry for your loss. Your art deserves to be remembered." The air grew warmer, the shadows receding as the candles flickered gently. I felt a presence beside me, a comforting warmth that seemed to embrace the entire rooftop garden. Elena's apparition appeared once more, her eyes filled with gratitude and peace. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice now serene. "I can finally rest." With those final words, her form dissolved into a cascade of light, leaving behind a sense of tranquility that had long been missing from the Grandview Mall. The oppressive chill lifted, replaced by the gentle warmth of dawn breaking through the night. In the weeks that followed, the footsteps ceased, and the haunted presence that had once tormented the rooftop garden was gone. The mall returned to its usual rhythm, the memory of Elena Ivanova becoming a cherished part of its history. Her art now celebrated and remembered by all who visited. That winter night remains etched in my mind, a testament to the power of compassion and the importance of remembering those who have been forgotten. If you ever find yourself alone in the quiet of the night, and you hear the faint echo of footsteps or catch a glimpse of glowing red eyes, remember my story. Sometimes, the spirits that linger are not there to haunt but to seek acknowledgement and peace. Honor their memories, listen to their stories, and you may just help a restless soul find the closure it so desperately needs. Because in the heart of winter, beneath the blanket of snow, the echoes of the past can reach out to touch the present, reminding us all that some stories never truly end. They simply wait to be heard. Story number 7. The Strange Guest at the Hotel. Winter in Vermont is a relentless adversary. The snow blankets the landscape in a thick, unyielding layer, muting the sounds of the world and creating an eerie stillness that seems to seep into every corner of existence. I work as the front desk clerk at the Maplewood Inn, a modest establishment nestled on the outskirts of a small town where everyone knows everyone else's business. The inn has seen its fair share of travelers over the years, but nothing quite like what happened that fateful night in January 2010. It was a bitterly cold evening, the kind where the wind howls through the trees and the temperature plummets well below freezing. The kind of night where you find solace in the warmth of a roaring fireplace and the comforting hum of the heating system. I was closing up for the night, my fingers numb from the chill as I fumbled with the lock on the front door. The inn was quiet, the usual bustle of guests long gone, replaced by the occasional creak of the old building settling under the weight of the snow. Around 2 a.m., my phone rang, jolting me from my thoughts. I glanced at the screen. It was the front desk. Since I was already here, curious, I picked up the receiver. "Hello, Maplewood Inn. This is Sarah." A moment of silence hung in the air before a voice, soft and almost ethereal, spoke. "I'd like to book a room, please." I frowned, expecting it to be a guest calling in for their stay. "Of course. May I have your name, please?" The voice hesitated, then replied, "Evelyn." I processed the request, noting that our records didn't show any upcoming reservations under that name. "I'm sorry, Miss Evelyn, but I don't have any reservations for tonight. Would you like to make one?" There was a pause, and then the same voice insisted, "Yes, please, just one room for tonight." I proceeded with the booking, guiding her through the standard procedure. "Do you have any preferences for your room?" The response was immediate and unwavering. "A quiet room, please." "Certainly. We have a room available on the second floor. Room 204. Will that be acceptable?" "Yes, that will be fine," she confirmed. I handed her the key and provided the necessary information about checkout times and available amenities. "Here is your key, Miss Evelyn. If you need anything, feel free to contact the front desk." "Thank you," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. There was something unsettling about it, a sense of longing that made my skin crawl. I hung up, dismissing it as a tired traveler seeking a last-minute room. Not long after, I heard footsteps approaching the front desk. I looked up to see a woman standing in the doorway, tall, with long dark hair that cascaded over her shoulders, and dressed in a simple, yet elegant coat. Her face was partially obscured by the shadows, but her eyes held an unmistakable sadness. "Miss Evelyn?" I asked, trying to mask my apprehension. She nodded silently, accepting the key with a frail hand before turning to ascend the stairs. I watched her go, the door clicking shut behind her, sealing the mystery that had just walked through it. The night continued in its silent watch, the inn's usual noises absent, as if the storm outside had swallowed them whole. Around 4 a.m., a series of knocks echoed through the lobby, sharp and insistent. My heart raced as I approached the front desk. Finding no one there, confused, I glanced up to see the front door ajar, the cold wind whipping inside the warm confines of the lobby. I grabbed my flashlight and cautiously stepped outside, the snow swirling in the harsh light of the moon. The footprints I had seen earlier led from the entrance into the dense woods surrounding the inn, disappearing into the darkness. I called out, "Miss Evelyn, are you out there?" No response came, only the howling wind and the eerie silence of the frozen night. The footprints were gone, leaving no trace of the mysterious guest. The next morning, the storm had passed, leaving the inn pristine under a thick blanket of snow. I decided to check on room 204, hoping to find some clue about Miss Evelyn's presence. As I entered the room, the air was thick with an unsettling stillness. The bed was neatly made, the furnishings immaculate, and yet there was an inexplicable emptiness that hung in the air. I approached the window, peering out into the snow-covered landscape. There, etched clearly into the frost, was a single handprint on the glass, delicate and precise, as if pressed there intentionally. My heart sank as I realized that Miss Evelyn had never actually stepped out of the room. The footprints I had seen were an illusion, a phantom trail left behind by a spirit unable to find peace. Determined to understand what had happened, I delved into the inn's history, speaking with the town's oldest residents and scouring old records. What I uncovered was a tragic tale that sent chills down my spine. The Maplewood Inn had been established in the early 1900s by a man named Henrik Andersen, a Norwegian immigrant who sought to create a haven for weary travelers. The inn quickly became a beloved landmark, known for its warm hospitality and the comfort it provided against the harsh winters. But in the winter of 1923, tragedy struck. A young woman named Evelyn Jensen had been one of Henrik's favorite guests, a kind-hearted soul with a penchant for storytelling and a mysterious past. She had arrived one snowy evening, much like the night I had encountered her, seeking refuge from a brutal storm. Over the weeks, she became a regular presence at the inn, enchanting guests with her tales and soothing the loneliness that sometimes plagued the remote location. One night, during a particularly fierce blizzard, Evelyn disappeared. She had gone to the front desk to check out, but never returned. Despite extensive searches, no trace of her was ever found, no footprints in the snow, no signs of struggle, nothing. The inn was left in mourning, and Henrik Andersen never fully recovered from the loss. Rumors spread about the haunted nature of the inn, whispers of Evelyn's spirit lingering in the snowy woods. Unable to move on from her untimely demise, guests would report hearing soft singing in the night or seeing a shadowy figure by the window. But Henrik always dismissed these tales as the imaginations of lonely travelers. Armed with this knowledge, I returned to the Maplewood Inn determined to put the ghostly presence to rest. That night, as the wind howled outside and the fire crackled in the hearth, I sat in room 204, holding the photograph I had found, an old family portrait of Evelyn, smiling warmly, her eyes holding a depth of sorrow that mirrored my own unease. "Miss Evelyn," I whispered into the silence, "I know your story. I'm sorry for what happened. I want to help you find peace." The room grew colder, the shadows deepening as if the very walls were listening. I lit a candle, placing it on the bedside table beside the photograph. "Please, let me know what I can do." The air shimmered, and a faint melody began to play, a soft, haunting lullaby that filled the room with its melancholic beauty. The temperature dropped sharply, my breath visible in the icy air. I felt a presence, a gentle warmth amidst the cold, as if Evelyn was reaching out to me. "Thank you," the voice echoed, ethereal and distant. "I can finally rest." The candle flickered violently before stabilizing, casting a warm glow that seemed to push away the darkness. The room felt lighter, the oppressive tension lifting as if a weight had been removed. The handprint on the window began to fade, replaced by a serene stillness that spoke of closure and peace. I sat there for a long moment, absorbing the profound silence that now filled the room. The ghostly presence that had once tormented the inn was gone, leaving behind only the lingering warmth of the candle and the comforting crackle of the fire. In the weeks that followed, the Maplewood Inn returned to its usual rhythm. Guests came and went without incident, the stories of hauntings fading into the background as the spirit of Evelyn found the peace she had long been denied. The handprint on the window never reappeared, and the footprints in the snow remained a distant memory, a testament to the night when the past was finally laid to rest. That winter, as I continued my work at the inn, I couldn't help but feel a deep sense of gratitude for the experience. It was a reminder of the delicate balance between our world and the unknown, and the importance of compassion in the face of tragedy. Evelyn's story became a part of the inn's legacy, a tale of sorrow and redemption that spoke to the enduring power of remembrance and the unbreakable bonds of humanity. If you ever find yourself staying at the Maplewood Inn during the dead of winter, and you feel a sense of stillness or hear the faint echoes of a haunting lullaby, remember my story. Sometimes, the spirits that linger are not there to haunt but to seek understanding and closure. Honor their memories, offer your compassion, and you may just help a restless soul find the peace it has long been denied. Because in the heart of the storm, beneath the blanket of snow, the echoes of the past can reach out to touch the present, reminding us all that some stories never truly end. They simply wait to be heard.